Right, let's start here for you. Over the past 48 hours, Eskom has ramped up power cuts from stage 2 to 3 to 4 and finally to 6. This does untold harm to the economy, with businesses losing productivity. And for all of us, it's downright frustrating and infuriating. Now let's go to our senior reporter, Aviwe Mtila, who is in Cape Town for us, looking at how people are coping with stage 6 blackouts. Aviwe, I see you're at an intersection. I'm imagining that, in terms of stage 6 blackouts, it was a nightmare on the roads this morning.
Not at all, actually, Maseko. The Western Cape is doing things a bit differently. We do understand while the nation is at stage 6, we're only on stage 4 here in Cape Town. In fact, the traffic lights that you see behind me are actually the first that I've seen that don't work during load shedding. We do know the measures in place from government this side where the UPSs are in place, but crime is a factor where some of them are stolen, so they've heightened their security measures. But we do know there are those moments of it going up to stage 8. In fact, I want to catch a word with some of the passers-by here to get their fears if there is that possibility of going to stage 8. Thank you for joining us at eNCA. But what are your fears? Now we're on stage 6, but it's stage 4 in Cape Town. If we are to escalate to stage 8, what are your fears?
Some of my fears is load shedding. The crime rate is going to go up. There is so much crime rate already. It's load shedding. People is coming out of work. They don't have to wash. There's going to be so much dramatic things is going to happen now. So I don't know what the government or Eskom is trying to do, because raping is going to go up. The crime rate is going to go higher. Now I had an interview today, so now the banks are closed because I can't even make a bank statement because of load shedding. So I'm going to lose the interview. You understand?
Okay, I want to catch up with this, brother. I understand you were supposed to be at work, but because of load shedding, you're outside this very moment. This, of course, hampers productivity. Let's talk to you about going to stage 8 and what that says about even your job.
Okay. Clearly, we can all see productivity is very low and people are getting frustrated. So, and in the workplace, people are also unsettled. So each and everything that's happening around, there's chaos. So this load shedding thing has impacted us negatively. So we're hoping that the government tries by all means to counterattack the situation and get it solved as soon as possible.
I'm going to try to bring this lady in. I'm not sure if she is one of the managers inside where you work, but I understand she's your colleague as well. There's no productivity now. How is it impacting the business itself?
I'm not so sure about how it affects the business, but we're trying our best to do what we can at the moment.
Okay. Just some of those sentiments on the ground, Maseko, but of course we've been speaking with government officials, especially from the mayoral committee as well. We spoke to the MMC of Energy in Cape Town, where we do understand what differentiates the province to the rest of the country is that they have that Steenbras hydropower station, which helps mitigate the impact of load shedding. Hence, in the Western Cape, they're on stage 4 currently, if in fact they are under the city of Cape Town. While we're on stage 6 nationally, it's only stage 4 here. But there are those fears that if it does go up to stage 8, it will have a catastrophic impact. Some of what we spoke to with Beverly van Rienen, the MMC of Energy. Let's take a listen to that.
It's really it's increasingly difficult. The higher those stages, it is increasingly difficult. We have here's the Steenbras hydro pump station, and we do have our turbines, but also, increasingly expensive, of course, to get those turbines running. All I can say is that it will be a challenge to the city of Cape Town.
And Aviwe, I believe that they even have a way to make sure that the traffic lights even stay on while the areas are going through stage 4 load shedding.
As I mentioned, Maseko, it's actually the first traffic lights that we see behind me that my colleague Mabuto is going to show you. That is actually off. We've been crisscrossing the width and breadth of Cape Town, and I was just surprised. It's a different experience from what we normally experience in Johannesburg, where we do know that one of the indicators that a certain area is undergoing load shedding is the traffic lights that are off. These are the first ones. We've been to Newlands, we've been to a number of places where all the traffic lights are working because of the UPS, we understand, system that they're using, where they actually save the batteries, recharge when load shedding is on. So it's adding a burden to the finances. We do understand there's a disaster management team that went in place when load shedding went on. I've been told by JP Smith that at least 100 million plus dent it will have to Cape Town. But let's hear how they then mitigating some of the factors that have to do with load shedding.
Even with the UPSs, even with doing our best with our enforcement, the metal theft unit and the facility protection officer program that we've rolled out, even with those interventions, we do have vandalism and theft of these facilities. Those batteries are valuable, and it creates situations where we have to deploy officers. As the load shedding gets bigger and more frequent, multiple areas start being down simultaneously, and that means you have to push more and more staff into dealing with these large areas without load shedding as pointsmen. So we have roving teams of officers who, as intersections go down, or if the load shedding is too frequent and the batteries don't have a chance to properly recharge or become defective over time, that there are pointsmen in those intersections. We don't get 100% coverage, but we do try and cover the most important intersections as best we can. It's a huge challenge, and it eats up a lot of enforcement resources.
All right, Aviwe Mtila, senior reporter, live to us from Cape Town. Let's bring you to Johannesburg now, where we find my colleague Heidi Giokos. Heidi, Aviwe describing a very easy situation in Cape Town, whereas they are 2 stages down in terms of load shedding compared to the rest of the country. But I'm pretty sure Joburg is a nightmare, especially looking at City Power having to deal with other issues with their infrastructure that have nothing to do with load shedding.
Yes, certainly. I think this is a massive crisis, and the fact that we have been subjected to stage 6 load shedding and Eskom not ruling out the fact that we could possibly even move to stage 8 is a very worrying picture. What does this mean for big factories, for production, for manufacturing and construction? We saw those GDP figures coming out 2 days ago that indicated that there has been an uptick in growth in that sector, but load shedding is severely impacting these businesses, because we've actually just been load shed. We are at max steel and massive production lines here. Load shedding has just hit end, but we are joined by the CEO. We are joined by Mike Benfield. I'll get to you now, Naval. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. Load shedding has just hit stage 6. It's not going to get better. This must be really affecting you, given the massive production line that's happening here.
Absolutely. We as you saw 5 minutes ago, we were production. This factory behind us was a hive of activity, and now it's absolutely dead quiet. We're waiting for our generators to kick in, but essentially that disruption creates chaos in our processes and in our ability to deliver to customers. It creates an environment where we are moving less material out of the gate. Less material out the gate is less revenue in the month, and it impacts our ability to break even or even make a profit. And therefore, GDP gets impacted. The country is impacted severely. I'm stating the obvious, but you can see what it means to a business like this. We are putting many thousands of tons of material through a production line, and when it gets disrupted, things happen, damage occurs, and we lose revenue and opportunity. I can't state it any more severely than that.
It's going to probably get worse. Eskom says it can't afford its diesel bill, and Mtila Power Station, the units are offline. But I want us to speak about how badly it's impacting you here. Are you able to keep all your staff because of what's going on? And what alternatives are there? I know you have generators, but what can you do?
So I think we've made contingency plans over the years. We've got generators in many of our facilities that cope with it. And Naval can tell you on my left what that means for us. It's obviously significantly more cost to run those. There are elements of our business. We own the Harvey tile product in South Africa. They produce a steel sheet, a roof tile, and they cannot run their production facility at all, even with generators. It's just that it consumes that much more energy, and generators just can't cope with that. They go down. They do not actually produce any tiles while load shedding is impacting them. And because they're a continuous process, you have to stop. and it takes up to 12 hours to restart the process. Massive disruption to the business, and the results this year are very evident of what that has meant to them. They are significantly down year on year in terms of production volumes in 2022.
Just lastly, Mike, and then I'll move over to Naval. If you had a message to the President, to Eskom management, to Eskom board about what this is doing to our economy, what would that message be?
Well, look, it's obvious. I think it's hugely disruptive and having a massive material impact to the economy. I think my message to the President is we need a plan. We need communication. We need a plan that says in 6 months' time we're going to be turning the sod on the next generative capacity. We need to replace the coal-fired power stations in one way or another. We need base load. We need certainty. The country needs certainty, a plan, what that'll create, to take this economy forward. And we need leadership, transparency, and above all, we need a pragmatic, practical plan that we can all buy into.
Certainly. Okay, let's bring in Naval Purin. Thank you for your time. I want us to speak about the fact that a few minutes ago there was load shedding. Your generators kicked in. This must be costing you a lot. What is your diesel bill looking like?
Yeah, so, I mean, if you take our normal energy cost, and you look at our diesel costs, it averages around 5 times more than our normal electrical costs from the council. More than that, I think if you take the costs, it's more on the service delivery, the cost of servicing, the cost of scrap generation, which makes it extremely difficult to compete in this challenging market.
I want us to speak about alternatives, because you can't always depend on these generators, especially because they cost so much. But are you looking at alternatives, because load shedding is clearly not going anywhere?
Yes, we're forced to look into this alternative energy space. I mean, the cost of alternative energy is extremely high, so we've got to do it very systematically. But in the interim, we cover ourselves with generators, and we're considering, other alternatives like in the renewable space, such as turbines and hybrid systems combined with solar. Yeah.
How long does it take for your generator to kick in, and how long? What does it actually do to your production line?
So that is where it gets extremely tricky for us. So essentially what happens is when the power shuts off, and if you look at the production lines, you will see material coming through the lines, and when it cuts off, whatever material is in the machine actually becomes scrap. So that becomes waste to the operation, and it's actually lost of revenue. Then when we start up, we've got to reset up the mills, because sometimes it has issues on the electronics, the PLCs, and all that types of stuff. So it could take anything between 2 to 3 minutes before you start up, but then the damages and the consequences in between just become extremely disastrous for our type of business.
I'm not sure if you or Mike can answer, but how much are we looking at in terms of what's being lost because of load shedding when it comes to machines being damaged or material?
Yeah, so it is significant because, these are all electronic type of driven equipment. They're very sensitive to spikes and peaks when you stop your electrical supply and you start up again. So, I mean, we've spent millions of rands in the sense of replacing PLCs, HMIs, those type of electronic devices within our plant. And we put in some corrective measures, in line to try and mitigate these huge spikes when the power disruptions occurs. But it's significant to our business in terms of a cost perspective.
I think if I can add, I think our concern is more downstream of us. We've got generators and we can cope in producing at a higher cost, obviously, but downstream at our customer levels, what is happening there? When we put our material on a truck and we go down to a customer's yard, he may not have that capability with alternative power or backup power, and our truck would arrive there and he can't offload our truck. That has a further disruption downstream of us in terms of the impact on our customer base. They can't receive the material, they can't operate, they can't produce their widgets that they're producing for them to sell, to cover their costs at the end of the month or the end of the next month. It has a huge knock-on effect to the economy, right from primary steel, in our case, right down to the fabricator, the light engineering shop that's using steel in their production processes. And many of those customers are battling. and it's having a knock-on effect. You know, we have 5,000 active customers in this country, and you can just see and work out the exponential effect it's having downstream of us.
Okay, great. Thank you both so much for your time. We do appreciate it. I think what is very worrying is the ripple effect on what load shedding is doing. And my colleague Linga is just showing you this production line, and you can see it's massive and it's on a massive scale, Masego. And I think if load shedding persists, it's really going to be detrimental to our economic growth, which we know we desperately need at this stage.
All right, Heidi Giokos live for us in Johannesburg. Let's leave it there for now.